The buzz of my phone cut through the silence like a siren in the night. Meet me tomorrow, art and coffee? The message from Mark, a guy I'd bumped into at the gallery last week, flashed across the screen. My husband, buried in his work across the room, didn't even glance up. That's how it started, simple enough, a little excitement in my otherwise predictable days. Mark and I hit it off over our shared love for abstract art and disdain for early mornings. It was innocent, or so I told myself. Coffee dates turned into long walks, our conversations meandering like the paths we strolled. It felt good to be seen, really seen, by someone again. One night, by the riverside, the city's lights reflecting off the water, Mark's hand found mine. I didn't pull away. The gap my husband's career had wedged between us seemed to widen, and in a moment of weakness, I leaned into Mark. The kiss was a spark in the dry tinder of my neglected heart. Juggling two lives became my new norm. I mastered the art of deception, my schedule a carefully orchestrated symphony of lies. The thrill of it was intoxicating, an adrenaline rush that kept me coming back for more. Mark started sending gifts, small tokens of affection, each one a secret I kept locked away in my drawer. They were evidence of my betrayal, but also of my existence outside the role of a neglected wife. I told my husband I was going on a business trip, a weekend getaway with Mark. The guilt gnawed at me, but the excitement of being with someone who wanted me, truly wanted me, was too much to resist. At dinner one evening, I watched my husband, lost in his thoughts. He seemed so distant, a stranger in the home we shared. I convinced myself he didn't notice my absences, my late returns home smelling faintly of another man's cologne. It was as if I was invisible to him, or maybe I wished I was, to ease the guilt of my betrayal. That's how I found myself living a double life, caught between the stability of my marriage and the exhilarating unknown with Mark. The excitement of the affair blinded me to the inevitable consequences, a ticking time bomb I was too caught up to defuse. Just grabbing lunch with a colleague, I lied smoothly, my heart racing as I spotted Jenna from across the crowded restaurant. She was here, in the same distant city where I was supposed to be on a solo business trip. The sight of her nearly choked me with panic. Later, when she quizzed me about running into me, I laughed it off, saying, "Small world, huh?" But inside, I was fraying at the edges, wondering how long I could keep this up. Mark's whispers of forever started to seep into our stolen moments, his words painting a future I hadn't dared to imagine. Why not leave him, be with me, he'd murmur, each word a seductive challenge to the vows I'd made. I found myself caught in a dangerous tide, comparing the man I'd married to the one enticing me with whispered promises of passion and excitement. Mark made me feel alive, wanted, and seen, emotions I hadn't associated with my husband in years. The creation of a secret email was a calculated move, a further step into the abyss of my affair. It felt like setting up a residence in a land I was only supposed to visit. This digital line of communication was our secret tunnel, hidden away from the prying eyes of the world I was lying to. One night, as we drifted further into an argument about the growing distance between us, I found myself silently accusing my husband of driving me into another man's arms. If only you'd noticed me, I thought bitterly, even as I argued about feeling neglected and misunderstood. His work had become his mistress, leaving me to seek solace in the arms of another. His late returns became more frequent, his explanations more rehearsed. "Work's been crazy," he'd say, but all I heard was, "I don't have time for you." It was easier to interpret his absences as indifference rather than confront the reality of our crumbling relationship. Each night he came home late, I felt vindicated in my actions, as if his neglect excused my betrayal. The weekend at the beach resort with Mark was a dream wrapped in the soft hues of sunrise and sunset. It was a world away from reality, where the only decision we had to make was whether to spend the day by the ocean or lounging in bed. It was during this getaway that I realized I had crossed a line I couldn't step back over. The intimacy and connection we shared were unlike anything I'd experienced before, marking a definitive point of no return in my affair with Mark. Each of these actions, driven by a mix of desperation, desire, and defiance, wove a complicated web I was entangled in. The thrill of new love with Mark juxtaposed sharply against the stability, and now, the monotony, of my marriage. Caught in the throes of an affair that was becoming more real by the day, I was forced to confront the inevitable question. Could I really leave my husband for a future uncertain, yet intoxicatingly inviting? The moment Mark slipped that necklace around my neck, it felt like a brand burned into my skin, a gorgeous, glittering symbol of my betrayal. Hidden beneath my clothes, it was a constant reminder of the double life I was leading. It felt like carrying a secret token of an alternate universe where I was bold, reckless, and utterly alive. Lying in bed next to my husband, I'd find myself tracing the outline of the jewelry, my mind wandering to a future with Mark. A future where every morning didn't start with a silent breakfast and every night didn't end with us turning our backs to each other in bed. I dreamed of laughter, shared secrets, and mornings waking up tangled in sheets in each other's arms. It was a seductive fantasy, one that made the reality of my marriage seem even more stark and unbearable. But guilt has a way of creeping up on you when you least expect it. Watching my husband sleep one night, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the faint furrow between his brows even in sleep, I was overwhelmed by a wave of remorse. The realization of the depth of my betrayal hit me hard. Here was a man who had shared his life with me, and I was tearing that life apart, piece by piece. The doubts started to seep in during a heated discussion with Mark about where we were headed. His words, once a balm to my restless soul, now sounded hollow. "Let's not rush things," he said, his commitment phobia suddenly in sharp focus. That reluctance, that hesitation, was a cold splash of reality on my fantasy. Was I really ready to upend my life for someone who couldn't promise me tomorrow? Then came the day I overheard my husband laughing on a call. That sound, so rare and genuine, cut through me. Jealousy flared up, not for another woman, but for whoever was on the other end of that line, sharing a moment of joy with the man I was betraying. It was a stark reminder of what we used to have, of what I was throwing away. I made up my mind to confess. "I need to tell you something," I began, the weight of those words heavy in the air between us. His reaction was a punch to the gut, silent devastation. No accusations, no anger, just a quiet, "I need some time to think." That silence was worse than any argument. It was the sound of his love for me, cracking under the weight of my deceit. Left alone with my thoughts, I was engulfed by suspense and regret. The waiting was excruciating, every minute stretching out endlessly. I had laid my cards on the table, betting everything on his love being strong enough to forgive me. But as the hours ticked by, I couldn't help but wonder if I had gambled away the best thing I ever had, all for a fleeting fantasy. The morning I caught my husband flipping through our credit card statements with a furrowed brow was the moment I knew the jig was up. "Strange expenses," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I could feel the walls closing in, each statement a breadcrumb leading back to my guilt. When he finally confronted me, it wasn't with anger but with a stack of printouts and a look of betrayal. "Can you explain this?" he asked, his voice steady but his hands shaking. The emails, the receipts, the hotel bookings, they laid bare the truth I'd been hiding. I crumbled, the weight of my secrets too heavy to bear any longer. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I lost my way." His response wasn't a raging storm but a quiet withdrawal, a retreat into a shell where I could no longer reach him. He threw himself into work, into social events, anywhere but home. The silence between us grew, a chasm filled with unsaid words and unshed tears. Then, I noticed the changes. The late nights, the secretive smiles at his phone, the sudden interest in his appearance. Was he having an affair too? The thought gnawed at me, a cruel twist of fate. I confronted him, jealousy and fear making my voice tremble. "Are you seeing someone?" His evasive gaze was all the answer I needed. Desperate for some semblance of what we had, I turned to Mark, seeking solace, or perhaps a way to wield the same hurt. But Mark's confession that he wasn't looking for exclusivity, that he was seeing other women, hit me like a freight train. I thought we had something special, I whispered, my voice breaking with the realization of my naivety. Alone and adrift, the reality of my choices crashed down on me. My husband, my safety net, was pulling away, and Mark, the man I risked it all for, was just a mirage. In a last-ditch effort, I suggested counseling to my husband, clinging to the hope of reconciliation. His non-committal shrug was a dagger to my heart. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew. I watched, helpless, as my husband started to untangle our lives, moving his belongings out bit by bit. The man I vowed to spend my life with was preparing to walk away, and the enormity of my actions, the betrayal, and the lies, settled in. I was losing him, not to another woman, but to the chasm my infidelity had created. As I sat alone in the echoing silence of our once shared home, the weight of my decisions bore down on me. The future I had envisioned, with either man, had dissolved, leaving me to grapple with the consequences of my actions and the realization that I had dismantled the very foundation of my life. The moment I decided to leave Mark, it felt like waking up from a dream, a fog lifting, revealing the stark reality of my choices. His indifferent shrug when I told him we were done, that I needed to fix my marriage, hit me harder than I expected. "Sure. Do what you need to," he said, already texting someone else. That's when it sank in. I was just another name in his long list of conquests, a temporary escape from boredom. I turned my focus to my husband, trying to bridge the chasm I'd created between us. I started with small things, leaving notes in his laptop bag, cooking his favorite meals, trying to ignite a spark of what we used to have. But each attempt felt like throwing pebbles into an abyss, waiting in vain for an echo. After weeks of silence, he finally agreed to meet me for dinner. I dressed carefully, choosing the blue dress he once said reminded him of our first date. I was nervous, rehearsing apologies, promises, anything that might make him see the remorse eating at me. Sitting across from him at our favorite restaurant, I poured my heart out, tears mingling with the wine. "I'm so sorry, I was lost, and I've realized how much I've hurt you, how much I've hurt us. Please, can we try again?" His face, once open and warm, was a mask of polite detachment. Then he dropped his bombshell, calmly stating he'd had an affair too, a reaction to my betrayal. The pain in his voice was a knife twisting in my gut. "I needed to feel wanted too," he said, and the simplicity of his words shattered any hope I had left. He told me he couldn't see a future for us anymore, that my betrayal had broken something irreplaceable. Hearing him say those words, the finality in his tone, was a devastation I wasn't prepared for. The man I loved, the life I took for granted, slipped through my fingers because of choices I made. When the divorce papers arrived, it was like signing the death certificate of our marriage. Each signature was an acknowledgement of my failure, the end of a chapter one wasn't ready to close. I tried reaching out to him, aiming for a semblance of friendship, or at least closure, but was met with a cold politeness that was worse than anger. It was the indifference of someone who had moved on, leaving me to navigate the wreckage of my decisions alone. This chapter of my life, marked by betrayal and loss, was closing, leaving me to ponder the ruins of a love that once promised forever. The realization of my actions, the depth of my self-deception, and the irrevocable damage done were lessons learned in the hardest way. My attempts to reconnect, to salvage anything from the ashes of our marriage, were met with the reality of a bond too broken to mend. The therapist's office became my weekly confession booth, a place where I could lay bare the tangle of mistakes and regrets without the fear of judgment. Sitting on that too comfortable couch, I spilled my guts, hoping to find a way to stitch them back together. It was my attempt to make sense of the chaos I'd created, to understand how I'd let myself get so lost. Word got back to me, through the grapevine of mutual friends, that he was seeing someone new. That news hit me like a truck. It wasn't just the fact that he was moving on, it was the realization that our split was real, final. No more what-ifs, just the cold, hard truth. I'd lost him, truly lost him, and there was no going back. Staring at myself in the mirror, I saw the consequences of my actions etched into my face. The pursuit of a fleeting passion had cost me everything that truly mattered. It was a hard pill to swallow, acknowledging that the damage was irreversible, that I was the architect of my own downfall. I threw myself into work, into self-improvement, into anything that might make me feel like I was moving forward, not just treading water in a sea of my own making. It was a desperate search for redemption, for some kind of sign that I wasn't entirely beyond saving. I tried to apologize to his family, to somehow make amends for the pain and upheaval I'd caused. But their polite, distant responses were a clear message. I was no longer one of them, no longer welcome in the circle I'd once considered my own. It was another blow, another reminder of all I'd thrown away. Then, at a mutual friends gathering, I saw him. Just a glimpse across the room was enough to send a wave of emotions crashing over me. Nostalgia, regret, love, it all swirled together, leaving me breathless. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The distance between us was palpable, a chasm too wide to bridge with mere words. So, I wrote him a letter. It was the most honest thing I'd ever written, a raw outpouring of everything I felt, everything I wished I could change. I told him I still loved him, that I was sorry, that I understood if he could never forgive me. It was my final attempt at reconciliation, a last-ditch effort to reach out across the void I'd created. Sending that letter was like setting a piece of my soul adrift. I didn't know if it would reach him, if he would read it, or if it would simply be cast aside, another casualty of the wreckage of our marriage. But I had to try, had to put those words out there, even if they were just a whisper in the wind. It was all I had left, the only way I knew how to say goodbye. In the dim light of my bedroom, the letter lay open, his words etched deep, not just on paper, but into the marrow of my bones. I wish you happiness, he wrote, a simple sentence that felt like the closing of a book I desperately wished had a different ending. It was his final goodbye, a gentle but firm severing of what once was. The finality of it left me hollow, a shell echoing with the remnants of our shared past. Days blurred into weeks, and the news hit me like a freight train: my husband was engaged. The reality of losing him forever crashed over me, a relentless tide of grief and acceptance. The ring he once slipped onto my finger, a symbol of our eternal bond, was now a painful reminder of what I'd squandered. I had to let go, not just of him, but of the life we had built together. Loneliness became my constant companion, a shadow that followed me into the light of new beginnings. In an attempt to escape its grasp, I reached out to friends I had neglected, seeking to weave myself back into the fabric of a social life I had once known. The warmth of rekindled friendships was a balm to my aching soul, a reminder that while some doors close, others remain open. The decision to sell the piece of jewelry my lover had given me wasn't easy. It was a tangible piece of my betrayal, a secret I had carried close to my heart. But as I handed it over, something within me shifted. The money I received went to a local charity, a symbolic gesture of trying to do good from the wrongs of my past. It felt like a step, however small, towards redemption. Venturing back into the world of dating felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Each date was a stark reminder of what I had lost, the depth of connection with my husband irreplaceable. Laughter felt forced, conversations shallow. The comparison was inevitable, each encounter leaving me more disillusioned than the last. The day of his wedding arrived, a day I had no right to be a part of but found myself drawn to like a moth to flame. Hidden in the shadows, I watched as he pledged his life to another, a moment so intimate yet so foreign. The joy on his face was a stark contrast to the ache in my heart. It was the closing of a chapter, the harsh reality of consequences born from my choices. As I stood there, a specter of the past, I realized the depth of my folly. My pursuit of a fleeting passion had cost me everything. The man I once called my husband, my best friend, was now a stranger promising forever to someone else. The finality of that moment was a stark reminder of the irrevocable loss my actions had caused. There was no redemption, no second chances, just the bitter taste of regret and the understanding that some mistakes can never. The air in Luigi's was tinged with the rich scent of garlic and basil, the kind of aroma that instantly warms you from the inside out. Tom and I were tucked into our favorite corner booth, the one with the slightly wobbly table and the view of the kitchen. It was our 5th anniversary, and we were celebrating the only way we knew how. With too much pasta and an ambitious bottle of Chianti. Remember the tiny trattoria we stumbled into in Rome? Tom's eyes sparkled under the dim lighting as he reached for my hand across the table. I laughed, squeezing his hand. How could I forget? You tried to order in Italian, and we ended up with enough food to feed us for days. It was a simple evening, but it felt like home. Our life together was built on moments like these, comfortable, familiar, and filled with love. By day, I shaped young minds as a schoolteacher, and Tom crunched numbers at a local firm. By night, we were just Sarah and Tom, sharing meals and dreams on our well-worn couch. Weekends brought our eclectic group of friends together in our backyard. The air would buzz with laughter and the clinking of glasses, a testament to the diverse, tight-knit community we'd woven into our lives. These gatherings were a reminder of the good that existed in the weave of everyday life, each friend a vibrant thread in the tapestry of our shared experiences. Among the dreams that fueled our conversations, one shone the brightest. Japan. Our savings jar was slowly filling, each coin a step closer to the cherry blossoms and ancient temples that filled our late-night dreams. We'd pore over maps and travel blogs, imagining ourselves wandering through Kyoto's tranquil gardens or navigating the neon-lit streets of Tokyo. It was more than a trip. It was the culmination of years of shared dreams and hard work. Our relationship was a fortress of mutual respect and understanding, even when the world outside seemed chaotic. We didn't always agree, but at the end of the day, our foundation was unshakable, built on a deep, unwavering trust. Then came Alex, the new teacher at school, with an infectious laugh and stories of travels and lands I'd only dreamed of. His arrival was like a ripple in the calm waters of our life, intriguing yet unsettling. His fascination with Japan and its culture mirrored our own, drawing me into conversations that stretched long into the free periods and after-school hours. As I sat across from Tom, laughing at his recount of our Roman misadventures, part of me couldn't help but wonder about the adventures that lay on the paths not taken. The familiarity of our life together was a blanket of comfort, but the threads of curiosity Alex had woven into my days were becoming harder to ignore. The evening wound down with shared tiramisu and whispered plans for our future, a future that seemed as certain as the stars above. Yet, as we walked hand in hand back to our car, the cool night air whispering secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to hear, I couldn't shake the feeling that our simple, content life was on the cusp of change. I never meant for any of this to happen, really. It started so innocently, or at least that's what I told myself as I found more and more excuses to work with Alex on planning school events. Our chats, initially about mundane work tasks, gradually shifted towards our personal lives, our dreams, and everything in between. There was this undeniable spark, a connection that seemed to fill a void I hadn't even realized was there. It was exhilarating, yet with every laugh and shared secret, a twinge of guilt nipped at my conscience, a reminder of the life I was betraying. The first slip happened on a cool, breezy evening. We had stayed late at school, lost in a sea of papers and plans. As we said our goodbyes, a moment of silence hung between us, charged with unspoken words and unacknowledged feelings. And then, it happened. A kiss that lasted a heartbeat but changed everything. The immediate rush of guilt was overwhelming. I had crossed a line I never thought I would, betraying not just Tom but myself. Despite the guilt, I found myself drawn back to Alex, time and time again. Each encounter was a mix of thrill and self-loathing, a cycle I couldn't seem to break. Tom's love, I rationalized, was strong enough to endure this, to forgive a lapse in judgment. But, deep down, I knew I was deluding myself, using his unconditional trust as a shield for my indiscretions. Lies became my new normal. Late meetings and weekend conferences were the veils behind which I hid my affair. Tom, ever the trusting husband, never questioned the sudden uptick in my work commitments. His unwavering faith in me made the deceit all the more bitter, a constant reminder of the betrayal I was living. The close call was a jolt back to reality. A friend's near discovery of me and Alex together sent waves of panic through me. The elaborate lie about a school project that tumbled out of my mouth felt like the lowest point of my deceit. The look of belief in my friend's eyes was a mirror to the lies I had woven, a reflection of the stranger I had become. Tom's trust, a beacon in our marriage, now felt like a weight. His support and love, once my greatest comfort, now served as a reminder of the depth of my betrayal. The guilt was a constant companion, gnawing away at the facade I had built around our marriage. Yet, even as I drowned in remorse, the thought of ending the affair seemed impossible, a solution always just out of reach. The discovery of the hotel receipt was an accident, a moment of carelessness on my part. Seeing Tom holding it, confusion and hurt clouding his eyes, was a gut punch. He thought it was a surprise I had planned for us, a testament to his unwavering faith in me and our love. The innocence in his speculation was a stark contrast to the reality of my actions, a reality I was nowhere near ready to confront. The lie I told him then, about a potential school retreat, was perhaps the most painful of all, a lie that widened the chasm between the life we shared and the one I was secretly living. The moment I saw Tom's face, I knew everything had changed. The air was thick with tension, his eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't ready to give. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. Was it hurt? Anger? The pit in my stomach deepened. Sitting across from him at our kitchen table, the same spot where we'd shared countless meals and dreams, I felt the weight of my choices crashing down on me. The silence was deafening, a precursor to the storm I knew was coming. When he finally spoke, asking me point blank about the affair, my world stopped spinning. The truth, a harsh and unforgiving light, spilled out in a torrent of confessions and apologies. I had naively hoped Tom's love would be enough to weather this storm, but the pain in his eyes told a different story. The next few days were a blur of tears and heartache. Tom's decision for me to leave our home felt like a physical blow, each word a nail in the coffin of our life together. Packing my bags, I was haunted by the memories of our happy moments, now tainted by my betrayal. Moving in with a friend, I was engulfed by a profound sense of loss, missing not just Tom but the very essence of our shared existence. Driven by desperation, I reached out to Tom, clutching at straws, hoping to mend the unbridgeable gap between us. But my attempts were met with silence, a void that echoed my fears and regrets. The man I loved, who had promised to stand by me through thick and thin, was now a stranger, shielded from me by his pain and disillusionment. Weeks turned into agonizing silence. Each unreturned call, every unread message, was a reminder of the chasm my actions had created. And then, the divorce papers arrived, a stark, unyielding confirmation of the end. Tom had made his choice, and no amount of pleading or promises could undo the damage. Our final meeting at a coffee shop, a place that once symbolized our casual, easy love, was now the backdrop for our last goodbye. Facing Tom, I saw a man changed by betrayal, his trust irrevocably shattered. The conversation was a formal dance around the inevitable, our words laden with regret and sorrow. As Tom spoke of his inability to trust me again, I realized the magnitude of my mistake. Our story, once filled with love and laughter, had ended, not with a bang but with a whisper of what could have been. The ink on the divorce papers hadn't even dried, and already the emptiness settled in like an unwelcome guest refusing to leave. My fingers lingered on the final page, tracing the signatures that untangled a decade of love, dreams, and shared memories. It was done. Tom and I were strangers bound only by the remnants of a life we once built together. The realization hit me like a wave, pulling me under with its cold, unforgiving truth. In the aftermath, I reached out to Alex, seeking solace in the very arms that had dismantled my world. But the magic was gone, evaporated into the harsh light of day. Without the thrill of secrecy, our connection fizzled out, leaving me more alone than ever. It was a hard pill to swallow, the understanding that I had traded my soulmate for a mirage. Meanwhile, Tom seemed to blossom. Word got around that he had found someone new, a woman who ignited a spark in his eyes that I had foolishly extinguished. The news stung, not because I wanted him back, but because I realized he deserved this happiness, a life untainted by betrayal. Watching him from afar, I saw what true resilience looked like. Tom had taken the shards of our shattered life and built something beautiful, something I had no part in. This was my crucible, a time for deep, painful reflection. I had underestimated the fragility of trust, believing it to be elastic, something that could stretch to accommodate my selfishness and snap back into place. I was wrong. Trust, once broken, required more than just the will to mend. It needed unwavering commitment and time, commodities I had squandered. Vowing to never make the same mistake again, I threw myself into personal growth. I read, attended workshops, and sought therapy, anything to understand the why behind my actions and ensure they never repeated. The lesson was clear. The allure of newness could never compare to the depth and warmth of a committed, loving relationship. I had chased a spark only to find myself in the dark. Work became my refuge, the classroom a place where I could make a positive impact, even if just for a moment. I focused on being the best teacher I could be, hoping to offer guidance I had failed to follow myself. My students, with their hopes and dreams, reminded me daily of the person I wanted to become, someone worthy of respect and love. But isolation followed me like a shadow. Friends we once shared sided with Tom, their invitations drying up as the news of the affair spread. Each missed gathering was a reminder of the cost of my actions, the price of momentary pleasure. I was learning to navigate this new world alone, a world where my choices had alienated those I held dear. In this solitude, I found a bitter freedom, an opportunity to rebuild from the ground up. The journey was long, filled with moments of despair and glimpses of hope. But in the silence of my choices, I discovered a resilience I didn't know I possessed. The road to redemption was mine to walk alone, a path paved with hard lessons and the promise of a better tomorrow. I never thought the act of packing a single suitcase could feel like tearing pages out of my own life story. But there I was, folding and refolding clothes, as if the act could somehow smooth out the wrinkles in my heart. The finality of signing those divorce papers had left a void, a stark reminder of what I'd lost and the price of my mistakes. The aftermath was a blur, a series of motions and emotions I navigated like a ship lost at sea, desperately seeking a lighthouse in the fog of regret. In the depths of my despair, I found solace in the most unexpected of places, a canvas. Painting became my refuge, the swirls of color a way to externalize the turmoil churning inside me. Each stroke was a word unspoken, a feeling unexpressed, a bridge to the parts of my soul I'd neglected. Months slipped by, each day a step away from my past life and, ironically, a step back towards myself. Then, at a mutual friend's wedding, I saw Tom. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, time stood still. The air was thick with all the words we'd left unsaid, but we settled for nods that masked the chasm of our shared history. The encounter was brief, yet it unearthed a flood of memories and what-ifs. That night, I poured my heart into a letter to Tom, an apology that was more for me than for him. I wrote of regret, of understanding, and of a wish for his happiness. But as dawn painted the sky with hues of new beginnings, I tucked the letter away. Tom had found peace, and I couldn't risk shattering it with my own selfish need for absolution. The decision to apply for a teaching position in another city wasn't easy, but it was necessary. A fresh start, a blank slate, it was what I needed to mend the pieces of myself. When the job offer came, it felt like the universe's way of telling me it was time to move forward, to leave behind the shadows of the past. I spent my last week visiting the places that held the most meaning for Tom and me. Each location was a chapter of our story, now closing with a gentle, albeit sorrowful, goodbye. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my nostalgia, to honor the love we shared and the growth that came from its loss. The move was a physical and emotional journey. My new apartment in the city was small but filled with light. I adorned its walls with paintings and photographs of my travels, symbols of my resilience, my pain, and ultimately, my hope for redemption. Here, in this new space, I began to weave the threads of a new story, one where forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, was the cornerstone. As I settled into my new life, I realized that the path to redemption was not about erasing the past, but about embracing it as a part of me. Every painting, every photograph was a testament to my journey, a woman who had lost herself in the pursuit of love, only to find her way back through the ashes of her mistakes. Here, in this modest apartment, I found not just a place to live but a place to heal, to grow, and to start anew. The key turned in the lock of my new apartment, a symbolic click that was both an ending and a beginning. I stepped inside, the weight of my past pressing down on me and the uncertainty of my future pulling me forward. The sun hadn't even risen yet, but there I was, dressed and ready for the first day of my new job. The thought alone sent a shiver of nerves through me, tinged with a flicker of excitement. New city, new job, new me, I whispered to the empty room, trying to believe it. The school loomed large as I approached, its brick facade a beacon of my fresh start. The staff room buzzed with the energy of a new school year, and I was greeted with smiles and introductions, a welcome relief from the solitude that had become my constant companion. No one here knew of my past, of the scandal that had upended my life. Here, I was just Sarah, the new English teacher. But as the day faded into night, the loneliness crept in. The empty apartment echoed with the ghost of Tom's laughter, the silence a stark reminder of the life I'd left behind. I missed him, more than I dared to admit, even to myself. The shared meals, the quiet moments, the understanding that had once bound us together, now all just memories. Determined to not be swallowed by loneliness, I threw myself into the community, volunteering at a local event aimed at promoting cultural exchange. It was there, among the bustling stalls and vibrant displays, that I met Maya. Her enthusiasm for Japanese culture was infectious, and we clicked instantly. She was vibrant, her spirit a stark contrast to the shadows that had taken residence in my heart. Our friendship blossomed, a much-needed balm to the ache of isolation. Through Maya, through the laughter and shared moments, I began to see the value of genuine connections, the importance of honesty and integrity. It was a hard pill to swallow, recognizing the depth of the pain my actions had caused. My friendship with Maya, so pure and unburdened by the past, served as a constant reminder of the person I wanted to be. Gradually, I found my footing in this new city, earning the respect of my colleagues and students. The past never truly faded, but it became a foundation upon which I built a new life, one step, one choice at a time. And then, there was Japan. The trip Tom and I had dreamt of, now a solo journey. It was both a pilgrimage and a testament to the distance I'd traveled, not just across the world, but within myself. Standing under the blooming cherry blossoms, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. I had ventured far from the person I was, finding strength in solitude, wisdom in regret. Japan was beautiful, breathtakingly so, but it was the journey within that marked the true transformation. This new chapter of my life, filled with new faces and experiences, was punctuated by moments of profound solitude and reflection. Yet, it was in these moments that I found clarity. My mistakes, once chains around my heart, had become stepping stones to a deeper understanding of myself and what it means to live with integrity. As I returned from Japan, I realized that the path forward was not about forgetting the past, but about embracing it as a part of who I am. My journey had been solitary, but I was no longer the same person who had left everything behind in search of redemption. I had found it, not in the forgiveness of others, but in the forgiveness I granted myself. The morning light hadn't even dared to peek through the curtains, but there I was, wide awake and buzzing with a mix of nervous energy and raw determination. Today wasn't just any other day. It was the day I decided to redefine my existence in this new city. No more hiding in the shadows of my past mistakes. Today, I was launching my first cultural exchange dinner, a step toward not just integrating into this new community but actively contributing to it. Here goes nothing. I muttered to myself, my voice a mix of trepidation and excitement as I set out the silverware. The dinner was more than just a success, it was the birth of a new tradition in my life. Conversations flowed as freely as the wine, and the warmth of new friendships filled my once cold and lonely apartment. This was just the beginning. Inspired by the night's success, I threw myself into organizing charity runs, combining my love for running with my newfound commitment to giving back to the community that was slowly becoming my own. But it wasn't just about filling my evenings and weekends with activities. At work, I found myself in the unexpected role of a mentor to new teachers. Drawing from my own trials and errors, I emphasized the importance of balance, integrity, and the courage to own up to one's mistakes. These sessions, initially formal and somewhat stiff, soon turned into heartfelt exchanges, blurring the lines between mentorship and friendship. My journey into painting, initially a personal escape, took a surprising turn when my abstract works were selected for a local art exhibition. Standing in that gallery, surrounded by curious eyes and whispered interpretations of my canvases, I felt a sense of vulnerability and strength all at once. Each stroke was a part of my story, a therapeutic release of emotions I had struggled to voice. The recognition for my efforts in the community and at school was both humbling and empowering. It wasn't the accolades that mattered but the affirmation that I was moving in the right direction, rebuilding my life on my terms, grounded in the values I held dear. Then came the anniversary of what would have been a decade of marriage with Tom. It was a day of introspection, of acknowledging the love we shared and the pain of our parting. I marked the day not with grand gestures but with a quiet walk through the park, allowing myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions: loss, regret, acceptance. The healing process was gradual, a journey with no shortcuts. Accepting the consequences of my actions and learning to forgive myself was the hardest part. But with each new day, I found pieces of peace, moments of grace that reminded me that while the past may shape us, it doesn't define us. Venturing back into the world of dating was a cautious step, a dance of vulnerability and hope. I learned to value honesty not just in others but in myself, understanding the fragility of trust and the strength it takes to rebuild it. My life in this new city became a rich tapestry of work, friendships, and personal growth. The story of my journey, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the possibility of redemption, and the transformative power of self-forgiveness. Despite everything, hope remained my constant companion, a beacon guiding me through the darkest nights towards a future filled with possibility. I held on to the belief in second chances, in the capacity of the human heart to heal, and in the endless potential for us to redefine ourselves, no matter the burdens of our. I woke up, same as any other day, except it wasn't. There was this weight hanging over me. The kind that feels like someone's just sitting on your chest. You know it's not real, but the pressure's there. My girls were already running around, same as always. I made them breakfast, kissed them goodbye when it was time for school. I guess I'd been a bit off for a while now. Gene knew. I could tell. He's always looking at me, trying to figure me out, I suppose. Can't blame him. Sometimes, I can't figure myself out. We've been together forever. Well, since I was 20. That's forever, right? I don't know what I was even thinking back then. We have 3 beautiful girls, a nice home. It's the picture everyone wants. So what's wrong with me? Then, Pierre came along. I'd be lying if I said he didn't make me feel alive again. I didn't know what I was missing until I had it with him. Maybe it was wrong, but it felt so right. That thrill of hiding things, of meeting in secret. It made me feel young again, like we were playing hooky from our lives. Gene found out, of course. One of the girls must have said something. He was broken. I'd never seen him like that, quiet and sad. All those times watching him trying to figure me out, I should have been trying to figure him out. I wanted to tell him I still loved him, but it wouldn't be true. I told him I was in love with Pierre. I expected screaming. Maybe things flying around as he throws stuff. But no, Jean just looked defeated. He asked me to stop seeing Pierre, said we could fix this, but we couldn't. I wasn't the same Marie anymore. Funny how all this started with me feeling stuck, and now here I am, stuck somewhere new. Pierre wasn't happy about all of this either. Turns out, secrets make him just as uncomfortable as they do me. Sophie, his wife, found out too. I think she was always kinda suspicious, women usually are. Pierre called me yesterday, said he couldn't leave his family, said he needed to focus on his daughter. He was choosing them, not me. I knew he would. My days blurred together for a while, everything a gray mess of laundry and empty plates. It's funny how even when you want something to be over, when it actually happens, it still feels like a punch to the gut. I'd see Pierre around town sometimes. His face always looked a little sad. Maybe I was just projecting. But knowing it was over, that I couldn't just call or text or run into him, that was hard. Jean tried to get me back. He'd bring flowers, cook dinners. It was sweet, and part of me felt guilty. Not guilty about Pierre, but guilty that I'd hurt my husband so badly and still couldn't go back on what I'd said. I'm sorry. I'd tell him, but I can't pretend anymore. We ended up having one of those ugly lawyer meetings you see on TV. Only, ours was quiet and sad, nobody yelling. Just a bunch of papers and polite talk while you're dying inside. That's the thing about real life, the big moments aren't loud like in the movies. They're this uncomfortable silence no one knows how to fill. Jean got the house. Made sense since the girls mostly stayed with him now. I didn't fight it. I found this tiny apartment on the other side of town. It was a fresh start, but every night I'd cry myself to sleep on my bare mattress. My mom said I needed therapy, that I couldn't do this alone. The therapist was nice enough, I guess. I sat there and tried to explain it all to her, about feeling stuck and then not so stuck and then just lost. Then, a few months later, I ran into Sophie at the store. We both looked terrible, probably both still crying ourselves to sleep most nights. Turns out Pierre was exactly who I thought he was. A cheater. Their marriage was over, same as mine. I was surprised how angry it made me. How dare Pierre ruin two families? Then, even more surprising, I felt a little pang of, something like pity for Sophie. In that moment, in the frozen food aisle, I think we both understood that it wasn't about either of us. It was about him. Time didn't make things easier, just different. I still missed Pierre. The therapist lady kept telling me it was an addiction, not real love. Maybe she was right. One day, Pierre called. We met for coffee, nervous like teenagers. We talked about our lives, our regrets, all of it. He looked older somehow, lines on his face I hadn't noticed before. Maybe I looked older too. In the end, we tried again. It felt like coming home, but a home you know doesn't have strong foundations. You're always a little scared the walls might fall down. Sure, we were happy in the beginning. But there were those looks he'd give me sometimes, a mix of hesitation and something I couldn't quite name. We both knew this wasn't a fairy tale ending. Meanwhile, life with my girls was a whole different battle. They wouldn't talk to me at first, wouldn't even look my way. Can't blame them. You ruined everything. My middle one finally yelled at me one night. I just stood there, tears streaming down my face, 'cause she was right. I tried baking their favorite cookies, taking them to the park. It was like pushing a boulder uphill. I heard from Jean that Pierre's kid hated me too. At least my girls weren't alone in being mad. Pierre tried to talk to her, but teenagers. They can hold grudges better than anyone. I told him not to force it, to just give her time. It was the least I could do after the mess we'd caused. He was going through it too. Sometimes at night, I'd hear him on the phone with Sophie, the voices muffled, but the sadness was clear as day. Turns out, when you jump into a relationship built on lies, the cracks start to show real fast. Our kids made sure of that. Pierre's daughter wouldn't even speak to me in the beginning. My middle one started acting out, backtalking, staying out late, getting into fights at school. It was like all her anger and confusion had to come out somehow. Then his daughter started pulling similar stunts, and that's when it hit me that we couldn't just pretend to be one happy family. We tried therapy, the kind where the kids shout and you awkwardly try to hold everything together. It helped, kinda. At least the yelling was somewhere other than our kitchen. I won't lie, there were days when I wanted to scream at Pierre, "This is your fault." But the kids needed us to be adults, even when we felt like kids ourselves. News came along that Jean was seeing someone. Alice, her name was. I saw them once, at the grocery store of all places. They looked normal. Happy in that simple way that makes you feel a little sick inside. Sophie got a boyfriend too, David. I guess everyone was moving on, weren't they? Pierre and I talked about it. We joked about double dates, but there was this sadness underneath. Like, this wasn't how it was supposed to be. He'd say things like, if we had met under different circumstances. As if that mattered now. We were here, stuck in this messy life we'd made. One night, he looked at me from across the dinner table and said, "Maybe this is our second chance. Maybe we can get this right." I knew what he meant. A wedding. A fresh start. Try to erase the past. Part of me wanted to laugh, to say, "What fresh start? We're standing in the rubble." But somehow, the words that came out of my mouth were, "Yeah, maybe we can." The wedding was, well, it was a wedding. Not the big white dress kind I had all those years ago with Jean. We did it at the courthouse, our kids with us and a few friends. His daughter gave me one of those half smiles, but at least she was there at all. My girls seemed mostly bored. Later, eating cheap cake off paper plates, Jean's girlfriend, Alice, hugged me. It felt weird but sincere. I think she understood that even in this whole mess, I didn't wish anyone ill. It's life, you move on the best you can. Pierre and I got this little house not too far from where we both used to live. It needed work, but I liked the idea of fixing it up together. We painted the living room this soft blue, and for a while, it felt like maybe this was it. A real family. The honeymoon was the real bright spot, though. Hawaii. Never thought I'd see it. We swam, hiked, even tried surfing, though we were terrible at it. Lying on the beach, his hand on mine, I finally let myself believe maybe things would be different this time around. But real life isn't a 2-week vacation. Getting back, his daughter was still distant, my girls and I still had those strained conversations. We did family dinners on Sundays. Pierre and I would put on a good face, but sometimes I could swear his daughter would look at us with this disgust. She wasn't wrong, was she? It made my stomach turn. The fights with Pierre weren't loud ones, more like simmering resentment under the surface. Over stupid stuff. Dishes left in the sink, who mowed the lawn. It was like all that baggage from our past lives, all the guilt, was too heavy to keep hiding. One night, I was sobbing at the kitchen table, and he just said, "This isn't working, is it?" And I knew it wasn't. It's funny, how even when you're the one ending things, it still feels like a punch to the gut. The relief is there, but underneath it all, there's still sadness. After Pierre moved out, that emptiness settled in again. It was different this time. Not the desperate kind I felt right after Jean left, but a quieter emptiness. Then the invites came. Jean and Alice were getting married. A big wedding, with flowers and a church and everything. I put on a brave face for my girls. I'm happy for him, I'd say, but I knew they could see right through me. Sophie's invite came next. Similar deal, a whole weekend thing at some fancy location. I got drunk at my kitchen table and cried when I got that one. The worst part was seeing Pierre at the weddings, forced polite smiles and small talk while the couples beamed, proof that happily ever after could exist, just not for us. Each time, I'd leave feeling that emptiness grow a little bigger. I wasn't jealous of Jean and Sophie. Okay, maybe a little. But it was more like this sinking feeling that I'd messed up my chances at happiness. We had the kids on rotating weekends, this awkward dance of custody agreements and shared holidays. There was a lot of forced normalcy, and every time I saw Pierre's face, that hollowness inside would spread. My therapist said to give it time, but time felt like the enemy. With every year that passed, the hope of finding someone, anyone, slowly faded. Maybe this was it for me. Maybe I was one of those people who just keeps breaking things and never gets to fix them. You know that saying, be careful what you wish for. It should have been flashing in bright neon lights in my head. Because wouldn't you know it, I got pregnant. An accident, Pierre called it, but that emptiness I'd been feeling. I think a little part of me wanted to fill it. Maybe I thought a baby could bring us back to that honeymoon feeling. At first, it was okay. The sickness wasn't too bad, and my girls were excited to have a baby brother. That gave me a boost of optimism. But then, the problems started. Constant nausea, doctor's appointments, and Pierre always had some excuse, a late meeting, a business trip. I got that he was busy, but it felt like I was doing this alone. The worst was the bed rest. Doctor said it was high risk. So, I'm stuck on the couch for months, watching my belly grow, and the space between Pierre and me growing too. He'd come home late, smelling of that perfume his secretary wore. That made the doubts creep in, even when I wanted to push them down. Finally, the baby came. A boy, we named him Ben. Holding him, this tiny perfect thing. It made some of that resentment fade. Pierre seemed happy too, but that honeymoon feeling? It never came back. New problems took its place. Money was tight. The baby cried all the time. Sleep became this mythical treasure that neither of us could find. Our arguments weren't even about the affair anymore, just stupid stuff. Dishes in the sink, who's changing the next diaper? Under it all, though, was this unspoken thing. We both knew that another kid wasn't going to fix this. He looked at me sometimes, and it was like he saw a stranger, a tired version of the woman he'd run away with. Some nights, I couldn't even recognize myself. It started with those little things, the kind that gnaw at you. Pierre being extra careful with his phone, coming home with his shirt smelling like her perfume again. My gut told me something was wrong, even when I didn't want to listen. Then one night, I was scrolling through his messages, stupid, I know, but there it was. Texts from Sophie, not about their kid, but personal stuff, asking how he was doing. When I confronted him, he went quiet at first, then defensive. It's just about co-parenting, nothing more. Liar, liar, liar. All that guilt, the whole reason we broke up their family, was it for nothing? It felt like a sick joke, the kind the universe loves to play on me. The house became this war zone. The kids fought non-stop. All three of my daughters were angry, and his acted like I was a monster. Every day started with yelling and ended with tears, mostly mine. Sleep was impossible. I felt myself unraveling, but I didn't know where to turn. Then one night, Jean called. It had been years. He just asked if I was okay. Heard some rumors about me and Pierre. It all came spilling out, the fights, my suspicions, everything. His voice was soft, and for a moment, it was like we were back together before all the bad happened. He didn't say, I told you so, just listened. Pierre found out, of course. Saw some text from Jean on my phone, blew his top. Called me a whore, the whole 9 yards. It was like all his anger, at himself, at me, just exploded. When I refused to apologize, he kicked me out. Said the house was his. That night, I drove to Jean's. It was pathetic. Showing up on his doorstep, suitcase in hand, tears streaming down my face. But he let me in. Made me some tea. I slept in his guest room, and for the first time in ages, it felt quiet. Of course, in a town this size, the gossip spread like wildfire. Did you hear about Marie, the homewrecker? Kicked out by her husband. People at the grocery store would look at me like I had a disease. This had become my life. A broken mess that everyone got to watch like a bad soap opera. Lawyers. Courtrooms. Custody hearings. My life was now a series of ugly legal terms. Pierre wanted full custody of his daughter, and he was going to use everything I'd done as ammo. Every tear I'd cried in front of Jean. Every whispered confession on his couch. It was all evidence of my unfitness as a mother. Then, the real gut punch came. I lost my girls. Not all the way, but they mostly lived with Jean. The judge talked about stability, but what he meant was that I was a mess. And I was. Crying in my car, waking up shaking. It was all on display for the world to judge. Jean tried, I give him that. But I was this black hole in his house, sucking in all the light his new life had. One night, he sat me down. I care about you, Marie, but this. I can't take it on. It's too much. Too much. That's what I'd become. My job let me go. Something about how the gossip was bad for the company image. It was like all the pieces of my life were crumbling around me. My apartment got smaller and dingier. Sometimes dinner was a bag of chips because it's what I could afford. It got worse. Sophie came after me next. Seems Pierre wasn't being the best dad after all. Too busy being angry to actually parent. So she used my whole situation against him in court, and she was winning. This was rock bottom, I thought. But you know what? It can go even lower. Turns out there's a whole world of rock bottoms. Each one worse than the last. First, Pierre lost it all too. Turns out, screaming at your ex in front of a judge doesn't help you win custody cases. Sophie got full rights to their daughter, and the smug look on her face in court. I wanted to scratch it right off. Pierre blamed me, of course. Said I ruined his life. Swore he'd never speak to me again. Which, to be honest, wasn't the worst thing in the world. But I still had lower to fall. The stress, the shame. At first, a few glasses of wine helped me sleep. Then it was a whole bottle, then even more. Before I knew it, the liquor store guy knew my name. I started missing work, then lost my apartment. There were blurry nights, waking up on park benches, not remembering how I got there. That scared me sober for a day or two, then the cycle started back up. My girls wouldn't even talk to me. I saw them sometimes, Jean would let me have them for a few hours. Their faces were hard now, not the sweet little girls I used to know. One day, after another fight, my oldest yelled at me, I hate you. Why did you do this to us? I had no answer. The worst night came when I passed out behind a dumpster. Woke up with rats scurrying nearby. And I thought, maybe this was it. Maybe the world would be better off without me in it. There were pills in my bag, too many of them. It could all be over, just like that. But then, I saw my girls' faces again. The looks of disgust, but underneath. Was there still a flicker of love? Of hope? I threw the pills down a sewer. There had to be another way. It may take years, but I owed it to them, to myself, to at least try and build my life up from this wreck. I don't know how, and maybe I'll fail. But I have to start.